The United Nations Planetary Defense Complex stood as a testament to humanity's newfound unity. Once divided by borders and ideologies, Earth now presented a singular, resolute front. The circular chamber was a marvel of architectural engineering, its walls lined with holographic displays showing real-time data from every continent and orbital station. Major Jennifer Matthews studied her reflection in the polished obsidian conference table. Her uniform bore no unnecessary decorations. Each patch, each insignia told a story of preparation and strategic excellence. At 42, she represented a new breed of military leadership, part strategist, part diplomat, part technological innovator. The Zorn ambassador's holographic projection flickered into existence, its crystalline body a complex latticework of translucent geometries that shifted and realigned with each movement. Ambassador Krell 9 was not what humans would call beautiful. Its form was angular, almost mathematical, with nodes of brilliant blue light pulsing along its crystalline structure. Representatives of Earth, Krell 9 began, its voice a precise mathematical calculation rather than a natural sound. Your planet has been under observation for several solar cycles. We have determined your species to be technologically nascent. A subtle ripple of tension passed through the human delegation. Matthew Rodriguez, seated to Jennifer's left, clenched his hand slightly. He was the lead AI strategist, a man who had spent the last decade preparing for this exact moment. Krell 9 continued, its projection expanding to show a galactic map. Holographic representations of hundreds of species and their territorial claims illuminated the room. Earth appeared as a tiny, almost insignificant blue dot. The Zorn hegemony offers you two choices, the ambassador stated, its crystalline body pulsing with what could only be interpreted as condescension. Complete integration into our confederation, which will require total surrender of planetary resources, technological archives, and population control, or absolute destruction. The chamber remained silent. Jennifer knew this moment was critical. Every human in the room understood that their response would define humanity's first true interaction with an extraterrestrial civilization. Rodriguez leaned forward, his dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "And what precisely are the terms of this integration?" he asked, his voice carefully modulated. Krell 9's form shifted, creating intricate geometric patterns that suggested something between amusement and contempt. Your species will be categorized as a Class 3 developmental population. You will provide labor, genetic diversity, and technological tributes to the hegemony. In exchange, you will receive minimal protection and limited technological advancements. Jennifer's mind was already several steps ahead. The Zorn believed they were offering a choice, but what they didn't understand was that humans always found a third option, one neither expected nor comprehensible by traditional galactic standards. "And if we refuse?" she asked, her tone neutral. The holographic display changed. It showed massive battle cruisers, each easily capable of reducing entire planetary surfaces to molten slag. Weapon specifications scrolled rapidly: energy output, destructive capacity, computational tracking systems that made human missile defense look like children's toys. "Refusal means total extinction," Krell 9 stated. "We have cataloged 3,742 civilizations. 3,741 chose integration. You will be the 3,742nd. A slight smile touched Jennifer's lips. The Zorn had just made their first critical mistake. They had provided humanity with absolute clarity about the stakes. Matthew Rodriguez caught her eye. A subtle nod passed between them. In that moment, a plan was already taking shape, not of immediate resistance, but of something far more complex. The human delegation remained calm. No panic, no visible fear. Just a collective, almost telepathic understanding that this moment would define not just their generation, but potentially the entire trajectory of human existence. Krell 9 waited for a response, its crystalline body pulsing with an algorithmic expectation of submission or terror. Jennifer Matthews stood, her movement deliberate and controlled. "We will require 72 standard Earth hours to provide our response," she said. The Zorn ambassador's geometric form seemed to shimmer with what might have been surprise. No species had ever requested time to deliberate before. "Granted," Krell 9 responded, its voice a perfect mathematical tone. "But be aware, your decision is merely a formality." As the holographic projection dissolved, the human delegation remained silent. The real work was about to begin. The Nevada Advanced Research Facility looked like nothing more than a series of unremarkable warehouse complexes from the outside. But 3 kilometers beneath the desert floor, a technological revolution was brewing. Matthew Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, his fingers dancing across quantum interface projectors. Around him, a team of the world's most brilliant minds worked with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. They weren't just developing technology. They were reimagining the very concept of artificial intelligence. "Traditional AI is linear," Rodriguez explained to Dr. Elena Kirchner, his chief quantum computing specialist. "The Zorn expect predictability. We're going to give them chaos." The room was a controlled pandemonium of technological innovation. Quantum processors hummed with an almost living energy, their computational cores running scenarios that defied traditional mathematical modeling. Each system was designed with what Rodriguez called probabilistic uncertainty, an AI approach that made traditional decision trees look like children's connect-the-dots puzzles. Dr. Kirchner pulled up a complex algorithm that looked more like an abstract painting than a computational model. "These are what we're calling fractal decision matrices," she explained. "Instead of following a predetermined path, these AI systems create their own decision trees in real time, adapting faster than any known computational system can predict." Rodriguez watched the holographic display shift and morph. What appeared to be random became a complex, almost organic pattern of potential responses. Each potential scenario branched into thousands of potential outcomes, creating a computational approach that was less about prediction and more about infinite adaptability. "The Zorn believe in controlled systems," Rodriguez muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We're going to show them what true intelligence looks like." In another section of the facility, a team of neurologists and AI specialists worked on something even more radical. They were developing what they called empathetic algorithms, computational systems that could not just process information, but understand the psychological and emotional contexts behind that information. Dr. Marcus Chen, a neuroscientist specializing in computational psychology, demonstrated their latest breakthrough. A holographic representation of a complex social interaction played out, with the AI system not just analyzing the interaction, but predicting potential emotional responses with uncanny accuracy. "Traditional AI looks at data," Chen explained. "Our systems look at motivation, context, potential emotional states. We're teaching machines to understand human complexity." Rodriguez knew their work was about more than just defeating the Zorn. This was a fundamental reimagining of artificial intelligence, a system that was less about following rules and more about creative problem-solving. Deep within the facility, a separate team worked on what they called distributed intelligence protocols. Instead of centralized computing, they were developing a system where multiple AI units could work simultaneously, sharing information and adapting in ways that no single system could predict. "It's like a neural network," one of the lead engineers explained. "But imagine each node having the ability to create its own subnetworks in real time. The computational complexity is essentially infinite." Rodriguez understood the deeper implication. The Zorn saw technology as a tool to be controlled. Humans saw it as a living, breathing ecosystem of potential. By the second day, preliminary simulations were showing extraordinary results. When tested against the most advanced alien warfare algorithms they could reconstruct from limited Zorn transmission data, the human AI systems were producing response patterns that were fundamentally unpredictable. "We're not just developing a weapon," Rodriguez told Major Matthews during a secured video conference. "We're creating a new form of intelligence." Matthews understood immediately. This wasn't about matching the Zorn's technology. It was about presenting them with a fundamental challenge to their understanding of intelligence itself. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the facility worked with a quiet, focused intensity. They weren't just preparing a response to the Zorn's ultimatum. They were writing the first chapter of humanity's true introduction to the galactic community. And the Zorn had no idea what was coming. The Information Warfare Command was housed in a nondescript building on the outskirts of San Diego. From the outside, it looked like any other government facility. Inside, it was a cathedral of psychological strategy. Captain Alina Reyes stood before a massive wall of screens, each displaying a different communication channel, social network, and intercepted Zorn transmission. Her team wasn't just gathering intelligence. They were preparing to wage a war unlike any in human history. Information is not just data. Reyes told her assembled team of linguists, psychologists, data analysts, and communication specialists. It's a living, breathing organism, and we're going to weaponize it. Dr. Marcus Holbrook, the unit's lead xenopsychologist, had spent years studying the limited intercepted communications from the Zorn hegemony. Their society was fundamentally hierarchical, built on a crystalline social structure that valued predictability and conformity above all else. Look at their communication patterns, Holbrook explained, bringing up a complex linguistic analysis. Every transmission follows a precise mathematical protocol. There's no room for ambiguity, no space for creative interpretation. Reyes understood the implication immediately. If the Zorn's communication was a rigid mathematical equation, human psychological warfare would be a complex, unpredictable algorithm. The team began constructing what they called narrative cascades, carefully designed information streams that would slowly but systematically undermine the Zorn's sense of certainty. They weren't looking to create outright panic, but to introduce subtle doubt into every level of the alien confederation's communication networks. One team focused on creating seemingly innocuous data streams that would slowly reveal internal contradictions within the Zorn's hierarchical structure. Another group developed communication algorithms that could subtly modify intercepted transmissions, introducing microscopic inconsistencies that would be nearly imperceptible individually, but devastating in aggregate. "We're not just sending messages," Reyes explained. "We're creating a cognitive dissonance that will slowly erode their entire communication infrastructure." In a secured lab, linguists worked on something even more radical. They were developing the communication protocol that was part language, part psychological manipulation. By studying the mathematical patterns of Zorn communication, they could create messages that would appear completely normal on the surface, but would introduce subtle psychological perturbations. Dr. Aria Rodriguez, a linguistic cryptography specialist, demonstrated their latest breakthrough. A series of transmissions that looked like standard Zorn communication protocols, but which contained deeply embedded psychological triggers. "Watch," she said, showing Reyes a transmission. On the surface, it's a standard administrative communication, but buried within its mathematical structure are linguistic triggers designed to create micro-moments of uncertainty. The genius was in the subtlety. These weren't propaganda messages or direct challenges. They were perfectly constructed communication packets that would slowly introduce doubt into the most fundamental levels of Zorn societal communication. Meanwhile, another team was preparing something even more audacious. They were developing what they called distributed narrative warfare, a strategy of releasing multiple, slightly contradictory narratives across various communication channels. "The Zorn expect a unified narrative," one of the team leaders explained. "We're going to give them 1,000 slightly different stories. Not enough to be obviously false, but enough to create systemic uncertainty." As the 72-hour deadline approached, the Information Warfare Command was preparing its most sophisticated attack. It wasn't about overwhelming the Zorn with information. It was about introducing a level of complexity that their rigid communication systems simply couldn't process. Reyes looked at the final preparations. Each transmission, each data packet was a carefully designed weapon. Not of destruction, but of psychological deconstruction. "We're going to make them question everything," she told her team. "Not through force, but through the most sophisticated psychological operation in human history." The first wave of transmissions would begin shortly after the 72-hour deadline. By the time the Zorn realized what was happening, the psychological groundwork would already be laid. This wasn't just a military strategy. It was a fundamental challenge to the Zorn's entire understanding of communication, intelligence, and social organization. And humanity was just getting started. The asteroid belt became a canvas of destruction, a battlefield that defied every known principle of space warfare. Lieutenant Jack Harper's voice remained calm as he guided the Phantom Squadron, a collection of drones and manned vessels that moved with an almost organic synchronicity. His tactical display looked less like a traditional combat interface and more like a living, breathing ecosystem of potential movement. "Swarm Protocol Omega-7, Harper commanded, his fingers dancing across a quantum interface that seemed to anticipate his thoughts as much as he directed them. The Zorn hadn't expected this. Their massive capital ships, each easily capable of obliterating entire planetary defense networks, suddenly found themselves confronted by something utterly incomprehensible. Where traditional military doctrine suggested concentrated firepower and rigid formation, human tactics embraced chaos. Harper's squadron wasn't a collection of individual ships. It was a single, distributed intelligence. Each drone and fighter possessed its own adaptive AI, capable of making split-second decisions while simultaneously communicating with every other unit in the squadron. They moved less like a military formation and more like a school of fish, or a murmuration of starlings, unpredictable, fluid, impossible to target. Enemy tracking systems are experiencing cascading failure, reported Major Elena Chen from the command vessel Prometheus. Our distributed network is overloading their computational models. The Zorn's initial assault had been designed to be overwhelming. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each capable of generating energy outputs that could vaporize small moons, launched a coordinated strike that should have annihilated any defensive formation. Instead, they found themselves fighting ghosts. Harper's squadron didn't just dodge. They transformed the very geometry of the battle. Drones would momentarily link, creating temporary computational networks that could predict and counter incoming weapon systems faster than the Zorn could adjust their targeting. "They're mathematically perfect," Harper muttered, "which means they're perfectly predictable." The asteroid belt became their greatest ally. Where the Zorn saw obstacles, human pilots saw opportunities. Drones would momentarily hide behind massive space rocks, using their surfaces not just as shield, but as computational reflectors that could bounce encrypted communication signals in ways the alien targeting systems couldn't comprehend. One of the Zorn dreadnoughts suddenly erupted in a cascade of explosions, not from a direct hit, but from a complex series of drone maneuvers that exploited microscopic structural weaknesses in its energy distribution systems. Major Chen watched in fascination. The human approach wasn't about destroying the enemy. It was about understanding them so completely that destruction became almost incidental. "Fractional computational advantage," she explained to her staff, multiplied across thousands of decision points, creates a fundamental tactical transformation. Harper's squadron wasn't just fighting. They were conducting a live demonstration of a new kind of warfare, one where adaptability was the most potent weapon. The Zorn's rigid computational systems began to break down. Their targeting algorithms, designed around predictable movement patterns, simply couldn't process the constant, fluid transformation of the human battle formation. "They're trying to apply mathematical models to a fundamentally non-linear system," Harper explained over the tactical channel. "It's like trying to predict the exact path of a lightning strike." By the engagement's conclusion, the Zorn had lost 6 of their 12 dreadnoughts, not through overwhelming firepower, but through a systematic deconstruction of their fundamental warfare paradigms. Lieutenant Harper's final transmission to the Zorn flagship was simple and devastating in its implications. Warfare is not about power, it's about understanding. The battle in the asteroid belt was more than a military engagement. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of intelligence, adaptability, and survival. Humanity had just introduced itself to the galactic community, and they had done so by completely rewriting the rules of engagement. The universe was about to learn that humans didn't just fight wars. They transformed them. The Psychological Warfare Command Center hummed with a quiet intensity that bordered on electrical anticipation. Captain Elena Reyes stood at the center of a holographic display that looked more like a living, breathing organism than a traditional communication interface. "We're not just sending messages," she told her team. "We're creating systemic doubt." Dr. Marcus Holbrook, the unit's lead synapsepsychologist, had spent years constructing a deep understanding of Zorn communication protocols. Their society was a crystalline network of information flow, each transmission a precisely calculated mathematical equation. Humanity was about to introduce a variable they couldn't comprehend. The first wave of infiltration was subtle. Microscopic alterations in communication packets, so small that they would be imperceptible to standard computational filters. Each modification was a carefully designed linguistic virus that would slowly erode the Zorn's sense of institutional certainty. "Look here," Holbrook pointed to a complex linguistic mapping. "We're not breaking their communication. We're introducing quantum uncertainty at the linguistic level." Their primary target was the Zorn's hierarchical communication network. Every transmission in their society followed a strict protocol: rank, purpose, approved information channels. Humanity was about to turn that precision into a weakness. Dr. Aria Rodriguez, the linguistic cryptography specialist, had developed what they called narrative cascades. Communication streams designed to introduce microscopic contradictions that would compound exponentially. "Imagine sending 1,000 messages," she explained, "each one slightly different. Not enough to be obviously false, but enough to create systemic confusion." The team had mapped the Zorn's communication infrastructure with surgical precision. They understood that for the Zorn, information was a rigid mathematical construct. Humans were about to show them the power of creative ambiguity. Deep within their quantum communication systems, they began inserting what looked like standard administrative communications. But each message contained carefully embedded psychological triggers, linguistic algorithms designed to create momentary cognitive dissonance. In one transmission, a seemingly routine military order would contain a microscopic inconsistency in its hierarchical structure. In another, a logistics report would have a subtle mathematical error that would only become apparent after multiple computational iterations. "We're not hacking their system," Rise explained. "We're making their own system hack itself." The first signs of success came quickly. Zorn communication channels began showing inexplicable delays. Routine transmissions started to experience microscopic timing inconsistencies. Command structures began to question routine information flows. Dr. Holbrook monitored the psychological impact. "Watch how their communication adapts," he told the team. "Each attempt to resolve the inconsistency will only introduce more uncertainty." It was psychological warfare at a quantum level. They weren't destroying the Zorn's communication infrastructure. They were making it destroy itself. Reports began filtering in from intercepted Zorn transmissions. Minor disagreements in fleet coordination, subtle questioning of established protocols, microscopic moments of institutional doubt that would cascade into systemic uncertainty. "The beauty is in the subtlety," Rise said, watching the holographic display. "We're not forcing their collapse. We're giving their own system the tools to deconstruct itself." By the third day of infiltration, entire Zorn communication sectors were experiencing unexplained computational anomalies. Fleet coordination became incrementally less precise. Routine military orders began to show microscopic variations that would be invisible to traditional analysis, but devastating to a system built on absolute precision. "They believe in mathematical certainty," Dr. Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "We're introducing mathematical chaos." The psychological warfare team wasn't just sending messages. They were conducting a surgical strike against the Zorn's most fundamental understanding of communication, hierarchy, and institutional stability. Humanity had found the ultimate weapon, not a missile or an energy beam, but doubt itself. And they were just getting started. The Advanced Research Facility in Nevada had transformed into something beyond a mere research center. It was now a living laboratory of technological alchemy, where captured Zorn technology was being dissected, understood, and fundamentally reimagined. Dr. Michael Calloway stood before a massive holographic display, surrounded by fragments of alien technology that looked more like abstract art than military hardware. His team wasn't just reverse engineering. They were conducting a complete philosophical deconstruction of alien technological paradigms. The Zorn see technology as a finished product, Calloway explained to his core team. We see it as a conversation. The captured Zorn systems were marvel of precise engineering. Quantum communication networks, energy distribution systems, and computational matrices that made human technology look like primitive tools. But where the Zorn saw perfection, Calloway's team saw opportunity. Lieutenant Sarah Armstrong, a quantum systems specialist, was working on what they called adaptive integration protocols. Instead of simply copying Zorn technology, they were creating hybrid systems that merged alien precision with human creativity. Watch this, she said, bringing up a holographic representation of a Zorn energy distribution network. Her fingers moved across the interface, and the rigid geometric patterns began to shift, becoming something more fluid, more alive. The core breakthrough was in understanding that the Zorn saw technology as a closed system. Humans viewed it as an open, evolving ecosystem. In one section of the facility, engineers were developing what they called quantum adaptive interfaces. Traditional alien technology followed strict computational paths. The human versions created multiple potential pathways, allowing for real-time adaptation that the Zorn's computational models couldn't predict. It's like comparing a railroad track to a river, one engineer explained. Their technology is a fixed path. Ours is a living, changing system that finds its own way. Captured Zorn weapon systems underwent the most radical transformation. Where alien designs emphasized raw power and mathematical precision, human adaptations introduced unpredictability as a core design principle. A captured Zorn energy weapon was completely disassembled, its components spread across multiple analysis tables. But instead of simply reproducing the design, Calloway's team was creating something entirely new. We're not trying to make a better alien weapon, he told Major Jennifer Matthews during a secured briefing. We're creating an entirely new technological approach. The hybrid systems they were developing defied traditional understanding. Energy distribution networks that could reconfigure themselves in microseconds. Computational matrices that learned and adapted faster than any known technological system. Dr. Elena Kirchner, the quantum computing specialist, demonstrated a breakthrough that left even the most seasoned researchers speechless. A captured Zorn communication node had been transformed into a living, adaptive network that could predict and respond to potential interference in ways that seemed almost sentient. They built a perfect machine, Kirchner said, her eyes reflecting the complex holographic display. We're turning it into a living system. By the end of the first week, the facility had transformed captured Zorn technology beyond recognition. What had once been rigid, mathematically precise systems were now fluid, adaptive networks that challenged fundamental understanding of technological design. Lieutenant Armstrong showed a final demonstration to the research team. A hybrid system constructed from Zorn technology now moved and adapted like a living organism, finding solutions to computational challenges that its original designers could never have anticipated. This isn't just technological adaptation, Calloway said, watching the demonstration. This is a fundamental reimagining of what technology can be. The Zorn had introduced humanity to advanced technology, expecting submission. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous, a species that didn't just use technology, but saw it as a living, evolving conversation. Humanity wasn't just responding to the Zorn's technological challenge. They were rewriting the entire conversation. and they were just getting started. The conflict had become something far beyond a traditional war. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of the Zorn hegemony's fundamental understanding of strategic engagement. Major Jennifer Matthews stood in the Global Strategic Command Center, a holographic representation of the Galactic theater spreading out before her like a living, breathing ecosystem of potential interactions. This was no longer about military victory. It was about a complete transformation of interspecies communication. "We're not fighting a war," she told her senior strategists. "We're conducting a systemic intervention." The combined efforts of Rodriguez's AI systems, Reyes's psychological warfare unit, and Calloway's technological adaptation had created something unprecedented. Each department wasn't just working in parallel. They were creating a holistic strategy that defied traditional military doctrine. In the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Jack Harper's adaptive drone squadrons continued to demonstrate a level of tactical flexibility that completely overwhelmed Zorn military computational models. But this was more than just military engagement. It was a live demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to conflict. Dr. Marcus Holbrook, the xenopsychologist, had been tracking the broader implications. "The Zorn view conflict as a mathematical equation," he explained. "We're showing them that conflict is a complex, adaptive system." The psychological warfare team had by now completely infiltrated the Zorn's communication infrastructure. But they weren't destroying it. They were transforming it. Each intercepted transmission was an opportunity to introduce new perspectives, to challenge the rigid hierarchical thinking that defined Zorn society. In orbital research facilities, scientists were doing something even more audacious. They were studying captured Zorn technology not as a weapon to be copied, but as a language to be understood and reimagined. Dr. Elena Kirchner's quantum computing team had developed systems that could communicate with captured Zorn computational networks in ways that went beyond simple data exchange. They were engaged in a kind of technological diplomacy, introducing concepts of adaptability and creative problem-solving that were fundamentally alien to the Zorn's understanding. "We're not just sending messages," Kirchner explained. "We're introducing a new way of thinking about information itself." The military engagement had transformed into something far more complex. Human forces weren't trying to destroy the Zorn. They were systematically demonstrating the limitations of the Zorn's own strategic and computational approaches. Matthew Rodriguez's AI systems had become something beyond traditional military intelligence. They were creating scenarios, potential interactions, and strategic possibilities that went far beyond simple conflict resolution. Each computational model was a philosophical statement about the nature of intelligence and adaptation. "Watch this," Rodriguez told Matthews, bringing up a complex holographic representation of potential interaction scenarios. The display looked less like a military strategy and more like a living, breathing ecosystem of potential interactions. By the third week, the Zorn were experiencing something they had never encountered in their 3,741 previous negotiations. Humanity wasn't presenting a unified, predictable response. They were presenting a constantly evolving, fundamentally unpredictable approach to engagement. Military engagements became philosophical statements. Technological exchanges became conversations about the nature of intelligence. Psychological warfare transformed into a complex dialogue about communication itself. Major Matthews understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just about defeating the Zorn. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence, one based on adaptability, creativity, and continuous evolution. "We're not just fighting," she told her team. "We're revealing an entirely new way of being." The Zorn had approached humanity with an ultimatum, expecting submission or destruction. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous, a species that didn't just respond to challenges, but transformed them. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic engagement, and they were just getting started. The Zorn High Council chamber was unlike any diplomatic space in galactic history. 12 crystalline representatives sat in perfect geometric formation, their latticed bodies pulsing with a mixture of confusion, frustration, and something that might have been approaching respect. Major Jennifer Matthews stood at the center of the chamber, accompanied by a carefully selected team that represented the most comprehensive demonstration of human capability. Matthew Rodriguez with his adaptive AI systems, Dr. Michael Calloway with his technological innovations, Captain Alina Reyes, master of psychological complexity, Lieutenant Jack Harper, representing the new paradigm of military strategy. "You have systematically dismantled our entire strategic infrastructure," spoke Krell 9, the primary representative, its crystalline form shifting with mathematical precision, without a single direct assault on our primary command structures. Matthews allowed herself a slight smile. "We didn't dismantle your systems. We demonstrated their fundamental limitations." The negotiations were nothing like traditional diplomatic exchanges. Where the Zorn expected rigid protocols and mathematical certainty, humans presented a fluid, adaptive approach that defied traditional understanding. Matthew Rodriguez's AI systems had been working continuously, creating potential interaction scenarios that went far beyond simple conflict resolution. Each potential outcome was a complex ecosystem of possibility, challenging the Zorn's understanding of strategic engagement. "Your technological approach assumes a fixed computational model," Rodriguez explained, bringing up holographic representations that looked more like living, breathing networks than traditional strategic displays. "We see technology as a conversation, not a conclusion." Dr. Calloway presented the hybrid technological systems they had developed, not as weapons, but as potential collaborative platforms. Captured Zorn technology had been transformed, reimagined into systems that demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to technological development. "We're not interested in conquest," Calloway said. "We're interested in understanding." Captain Alina Reyes had systematically broken down the Zorn's communication infrastructure, not through destruction, but through a sophisticated psychological intervention that had introduced complexity into their most fundamental communication protocols. "Information is not a weapon," she explained. "It's a living system of potential interactions." Lieutenant Jack Harper demonstrated how their military approach wasn't about overwhelming force, but about adaptive, distributed intelligence. Military engagement became a philosophical statement about the nature of strategic thinking. The Zorn High Council was experiencing something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't presenting a traditional diplomatic resolution. They were offering a comprehensive reimagining of interspecies interaction. "We propose not a surrender," Matthews said, her voice calm and precise, "but a collaborative framework that transforms our initial confrontation into an opportunity for mutual understanding." The proposal was radical. Instead of territorial claims or resource extraction, humans were offering something far more valuable, a fundamental exchange of perspective. Technology sharing that went beyond simple data transfer. Strategic collaboration that wasn't about dominance, but about collective evolution. Krell 9's crystalline form began to pulse with a complex mathematical pattern that suggested something approaching emotional complexity. "You have not defeated us," the representative stated. "You have challenged our entire understanding of strategic engagement." "Precisely," Matthews responded. "The resolution wasn't a treaty. It was a living document, designed with the same adaptive capabilities that had defined humanity's entire approach. Technological exchanges would be fluid, strategic collaborations would be dynamic, and the very framework of the agreement was designed to evolve." Dr. Elena Kirchner's quantum communication systems were already developing collaborative platforms that would allow for unprecedented levels of cross-species information exchange, not as a controlled transfer, but as a living, adaptive network of potential interactions. "We're not just sharing information," Kirchner explained. "We're creating a new way of understanding information itself." As the negotiations concluded, it became clear that humanity had done something unprecedented. They hadn't just survived an existential threat. They had transformed the very nature of the threat itself. The Zorn High Council was left with more than a diplomatic resolution. They were confronted with a fundamental challenge to their understanding of intelligence, communication, and strategic engagement. Humanity had introduced itself to the galactic community, not as a species to be conquered or controlled, but as a dynamic, adaptive force that could transform challenges into opportunities. And they were just getting started.